Once you have been married under the act, you have married that woman. Any other thing is bigamy. Cough, cough, Judy Austin and Yulo Joji. Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Sotoye Kelechi Wunzi, aka the Legal Juggernaut, aka your legal big sister. Okay, and this is an episode of the Legal Roundup where we talk about all things legal that affect you and I. Hi guys, so in today's episode we're going to be talking about legal marriages in Nigeria. We're going to be specifically talking about marriages under the Matrimonial Causes Act, which is marriages under the law. Okay, that's court marriages. One of my subscribers sent me a message asking me what are the duties of spouses who are married under the act, right? Who are married in court, who did church marriage or white wedding, and they did a registry. They gave them marriage certificates. Okay, so we're going to be talking about that briefly, and then yes, I would like your opinion about things as well. Okay, so let's get into the video. I think the first thing we need to highlight is that under Nigerian law, there are three different types of marriages. So there's native law and custom. Okay, that is traditional marriage. There is marriage under the act, that is court marriage, and there's Islamic marriage. Okay, so those are the three marriages that are recognized by Nigerian law. Any other thing you are doing is between you and your spouse. It's not necessarily marriage. Okay, so we know that in customary marriages there's the payment of bride price, the payment of the dowry, exchanging some gifts and things like that. So that is the way to recognize whatever that native law and custom is. So somebody in Kogi, for instance, it might not just be bride price, it might be something else they will do. Whatever the rights of that community is, as long as it has been performed, then okay, it is the rights and custom. You have done the traditional marriage and you're done with that, right? The second type of marriage is marriage under the act. Okay, that is court marriage. You get married in a registry. River State, for instance, has a few registries where you go, you sign the documents, you are presented with a marriage certificate, and you are married under the law. Some churches, are registered or are licensed to give that same service. So sometimes these people, they don't do the registry marriage, they go ahead and do it in court, and they are presented with a marriage certificate as well. Be careful of this, because not all marriages in churches have that marriage certificate. Okay, have that license to give you the official marriage certificate. I believe the coat of arms, the Nigerian coat of arms, is usually on the official marriage certificate. So make sure that wherever you're getting married, that if you want to get married under the act, if that is your intention, that place of worship is a licensed place of worship to give out marriage certificates, or you go to the registry and you do that. And there's also the Islamic marriage. Like I said, I don't really know the details about Islamic marriages, but if you know them and you want to put them in the comment section, we would all be willing to learn. So I'll put the question that the lady asked here so that we can see what she wants to know. What are the duties of a man and a woman, husband and wife, who are married under the act? There's no clear stipulation of what the duties are. I did my research. There's no official responsibilities that the law says. Like, there's no word in section what of anything that the law has said these are duties and responsibility of a spouse who are married under the act. But the law, the Matrimonial Causes Act, does state what are the reasons for dissolution of marriage. Okay, what is the reason for dissolution of marriage? What are the grounds that you can infer? Like, if you come to the court and say this has happened, the court can grant you a dissolution of marriage. From those grounds, I'm going to kind of infer, okay, what the rights and responsibilities are, if that makes any sense. So knowing what the law does not want to happen gives us an idea of what the law wants to happen, basically. I don't know if you're getting my drift or my inclination. So section 15 subsection 1 of the Matrimonial Causes Act clearly states that there's only one ground for the dissolution of marriage, and that ground is that the marriage has broken down irretrievably. As in, there's nothing you can do, there's no solution, there's no hope anymore. The marriage has broken down irretrievably. So any good lawyer that is producing a petition or putting forward a petition to the court of dissolution of marriage, the only thing they're going to say is that the marriage has broken down irretrievably. Now, subsection 2 of that same section 15 goes on to kind of break down some of the scenarios that show that a marriage has broken down irretrievably, as in there is no more hope. And I'm going to read out some of those subsections for you right now. The first one is that the respondent has willfully and persistently refused to consummate the marriage. So lack of consummation of the marriage is a ground for dissolution of marriage. That since the marriage, the respondent has committed adultery and the petitioner finds it intolerable to live with the respondent. So commission of adultery, so infidelity, is a ground for dissolution of marriage. That since the marriage, the respondent has behaved in such a way that the petitioner cannot reasonably be expected to live with the respondent. So there's a way, maybe domestic violence. This is where all those domestic violence, bad habits, alcoholism, abuse, all sorts of abuse. This is the angle that you can come under and say, okay, the petitioner has behaved in such a way that I cannot reasonably be expected to live with the person, right? Sorry, the respondent has behaved in a way, not the petitioner. That the respondent has deserted the petitioner for a continuous period of at least 1 year immediately preceding the presentation of the petition. So for 1 year before the presentation of the petition, that the petitioner has, or the respondent rather, has deserted the marriage. That the parties to the marriage have lived apart for a continuous period of at least 2 years immediately preceding the presentation of the petition, and the respondent does not object to the decree being granted. So they've been living separately for 2 years and the respondent does not object, okay? So sometimes the respondent objects and says, oh, I don't want to be divorced. But if there's no objection, it's a clean break. 2 years being separated, you can dissolve the marriage. The next one is that the parties to the marriage have lived apart for a continuous period of at least 3 years immediately preceding the presentation of the petition. This subsection does not require the consent or not of the respondent. So if you've been living about for 3 years, then it's fine. You can present a petition of dissolution of marriage to the court and it's all right. That the other party to the marriage has for a period of not less than 1 year failed to comply with a decree of restitution of conjugal rights made under this act. That one is explanatory. That the other party to the marriage has been absent from the petitioner from such a time as in the circumstances as to provide reasonable grounds for presumption that he or she is dead. So basically, you've been living apart for such a long time that it's obvious, or you can assume that the person has died. These things, I think this angle, I've never really seen a petition based on this angle, but I believe that it might be those kind of scenarios where the guy japped, okay, left for abroad and you don't hear from him anymore, or things like that. You can assume that he's dead and dissolve the marriage in some cases, I believe. Don't quote me, like I said. Now, these are the grounds for dissolution of marriage. So if you now look at this clearly, you can kind of see what are the expectations the court has of those who are married under the act. One of them is fidelity, okay? So the duties of the parties is to respect each other and remain faithful. So one of the duties is to remain faithful, like I said, dutiful to remain faithful to each other, duty not to commit adultery. The way Nigeria is right now, adultery is the order of the day. Every man has a girlfriend, every woman has a boyfriend, people know about it, people condone it. But under the act, it's not supposed to be so, and it is a solid ground for dissolution of marriage. The only problem with coming to dissolve a marriage based on this is that you have to now bring in evidence. So you have to bring in evidence of that your husband cheated. You have to bring the person that he cheated with. That person will give testimony, and it can become a lot messy. It can become really messy. That's why a lot of people just prefer the whole separation part. Okay, 2 years living apart or 3 years living apart. So it's just a clean break and you go. Okay. The next duty is to live together and provide mutual support and assistance. If you think about it in the way that, oh, you're expected to live together, you're expected to live in a reasonable way, you're expected to live in harmony. Okay, when the court says, oh, you have behaved in a way that is a reasonable person will not want to continue to live in that marriage, okay, it infers that one of the duties spouses have to each other is to live together and live in harmony, living together. The law is expecting that you live together, right, and live in harmony, live in peace, live in a conducive and, cohabit in a way that is pleasurable to both of you, I guess. So duty to, you can think about custody of children. The law doesn't necessarily talk about the custody of children in this section, but when dissolution of marriage happens, a lot of the time the law considers the rights and the privileges of the children, considers their welfare, considers a lot of things. So when you're married under the act, it is important and it's necessary to know that the welfare of the children are important. So spouses have the duty to protect and ensure that their welfare, maintenance, education, and the health of the children are intact. Because when there's ever the issue of custody or dissolution, the children come into play, and usually parties now try to use the children to, do all sorts of things. They try to manipulate with the kids and the welfare of the kids, but the court is always interested in the best interest. English is the court is always invested in the best interest of the children. So therefore, okay, that is not good English. Therefore, it is pertinent to note that the welfare of the children are important, and one of the primary duties of spouses who have children and are married under the Act. Duty to consummate the marriage. Okay, we talked about lack of consummation of marriage as one of the grounds for dissolution of marriage. So it infers that one of the duties of the spouse is to consummate the marriage. I feel like a marriage, if not consummated, I won't, don't quote me on that, but it might be one of the grounds for even annulment of a marriage. But I will check and confirm. If it's not correct, I'll put it here. If it's correct, I'll give it thumbs up. Yeah, so consummation of the marriage is important. It's one of the duties of the spouses to consummate the marriage. Okay, and consummation therefore leads to children, leads to the responsibilities of children, leads to companionship, leads to living together, fidelity, all of that now coming together as one big duty. So what are the rights? Do spouses have any rights now in this marriage? Talk about duties. Duties and rights are completely different things, right? Thinking about rights, it will make you think about case law. It will make you think about the laws that have come out of the Matrimonial Causes Act, the repercussions of some of the things that have happened that have created laws, regarding some issues. Let me try to explain what I'm trying to say. For instance, there's a right to inherit property from your husband. There's a law in Rivers State, inheritance rights laws for the women that just come out. And prior to now, when women lost their husbands, they found that maybe the family members of the man or the in-laws or the kin will come and take all the property and claim that, okay, she's going to marry another man, blah, 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 and all of that stuff. And so she didn't have rights to the property, even though she contributed to the property. Now, there's a right that women have, okay, that you have a right to inherit from your husband, inherit property from your husband, even if you did not physically contribute, okay? We'll talk about in another video, we'll deal with that later, but you have a right to inherit from your husband, unless it is family land, okay? I know that the law says you can inherit family land, but when you remarry, okay, and you don't have children yet, if you have children, the land goes to the children, but not you. But when you remarry, the land goes back to the husband's family because it is family land. But if it's private property, personal property between you and the man, you have a right to inheritance of that property. You also have a right to life. You have the right to your personal dignity. You have a right to privacy. These are human rights, generally speaking. And the right to life now comes into play when we talk about domestic violence, we talk about abuse, we talk about physical violence, we talk about all those kinds of things. You have a right to life, okay? You have the right to your personal dignity. You have a right not personal dignity. Let's say you guys fight, right? You have a discourse or a disagreement, or you have a fight or something, and the man kicks you out of the house. There's a law, the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, says that a man cannot pursue, he cannot chase a woman out of their common shared space, out of their house. So you have a right to your dignity. He can't pack your things out, he can't, or he shouldn't. Even if he does, you can, send the police after him. I bet you didn't know that. Okay, yes, you have a right to be inside your house. So when they say, "Get out! This is my house," no, the law says I should be in this house. If you want to go, you can go, but you can't kick me out. Okay, so let's understand that you have a right to dignity, you have a right to privacy. All this, so you don't check your phones, you don't do this, you don't do that, blah 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 blah. It's wrong. Okay, you also have a right to your personal life. I don't know how to explain this. You have a right. I don't know how to explain the right itself, but a man cannot isolate you from your family and your friends. There's a law, literally stipulation in the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, right, that isolation, that kind of manipulation is prohibited under the law, and there's a prison sentence, maybe 2 or 3 years in prison, and it's fine. I don't quote me on that. We're not talking about this specifically, but there is a law that says that. So we have all of that, okay? Duty to your personal security. We talked about domestic violence. There's spousal battery. There's also rape and all of those things that that are covered under the act. So there's a right to also jointly own property. We talked about rights of inheritance. That also goes to rights to own property. So we've talked about this in another video recently where I was admonishing women and saying that we have to be smarter about this. when you're buying property, especially when you contribute, but even if you don't contribute, when you're buying property, make sure, if that is the issue, make sure that the property is in your name as well, and in your name and your first name and your last name. Don't, just not Mrs. Muzi, just not Mrs. Thompson or Mrs. whatever your name is. It must be Mrs. Sutoye Kelechi Muzi, that kind of thing. So you have a right to own joint property together, all right? And so yeah, that secures your financial position also, which leads to the right to financial provision. Okay, I know that this is based on individual marriages, right? It cannot be, the law cannot stipulate how you manage your finances, okay, how you share. But you should also have a right to financial protection. You have a financial contribution and all of that, because there's something called economic violence, there's something called financial abuse, and the law frowns against it, right? Once you are married under the act, all the laws are subject to your marriage. So a man cannot refuse to contribute. He cannot refuse to pay you or give you allowance or stop you from working. A lot of times we see that when a man he says, get my, oh, I want you to stay home and take care of the kids, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. Yeah, the law is like, okay, if this is going to be resulting in financial manipulation, financial violence, economic violence, then it's wrong, okay, and it's against the law. So you have a right to financial provision, but that can be interpreted in many different ways, okay, if you understand what I'm trying to say. So there's also, I think, now this is subject to the law, and this is also subject to probate and all of that. But when the deceased, the spouse has died, there's also rights to financial provision from his estate. Okay, so now I know if he has written a will and he has decided on how he's going to share his property and all of that, that's one thing. But if he has not written a will, I believe that you still have a right to financial provision. Whoever is the administrator of the estate, if it's not you, you should have a right, because you live with this person for an extended period of time and you shared a life together, so you should be able to be entitled to a part of his estate. But again, if he wrote a will and he was specific about certain things, I don't know if you can challenge, anybody can challenge a will, so it's possible to challenge the will. But if you're not financially taken care of, then maybe you can challenge it, but you should have a right to his estate, especially if this is where your name comes in. Part of the property belongs to you. So if you have a CFO, a deed of assignment or whatever, your name is on it, some of the properties are your name and all of that stuff. This is why also I believe that as a woman you should also try and have your own, just in case some of these things happen, or just in case it's a person that does not even have the financial capacity to take care of you afterward. Okay, sometimes we have kids, we have many kids, or we have a spouse and then the person dies and you realize the person was actually broke. Where do you start from? Okay, this is a sidebar, it's not necessarily part of this conversation we're having, but it's important to talk about it. Where do you start from? Where do you go from there? If he doesn't have anything to his name and you have 5 children, how are you going to take care of them? So it's important as women that we also find the way to earn, for ourselves and for the sake of our children and our future and our livelihood. Yeah, another right that I think that we have as women, because I'm talking to women, which relates to consummation of marriage, also companionship. Okay, some people can be married and just desert the marriage, which we talked about in one of the grounds for dissolution of marriage. Just leave the person. I think you have, and I know you have a right to companionship, okay, and consortium. So that's being together, basically. You have a right to that. So based on all this, I don't know if there are any other rights. I don't know if there are lawyers watching this and you think that they're right. Maybe to the custody of the children. Okay, yeah, you can say there's a right to the custody of the children, especially in relation to when the spouse passes away or when there's dissolution of marriage. Okay, as a woman, as a man, you both have joint rights to the custody of the children, unless there are reasons why maybe the children are younger. The court looks at the age of the children sometimes and will not give full custody to a man when they're like 2 years old, 1 year old, when they're still breastfeeding, that kind of thing. Sometimes the court would maybe inclined to give custody to the woman, but finds that she's not financially capable of taking care of the children on her own, like maybe she doesn't have a roof over her head or something like that. This is why, again, women, you need to have your own, so that God forbid something happens, they don't take your kids away from you and somebody else ends up raising your kids. So you have a right to custody of your children. Shared custody is what the court normally gives most times, unless the man is not interested in living with the children, or somebody's, something has happened or something like that. But usually the court tries to give maybe primary custody to the mother. So you have primary custody, but then the man has visitation rights, but the man still has a right to see his children and spend time with them, maybe during holidays or something like that. So those are the rights that spouses have to each other in, you know, a marriage under the Matrimonial Causes Act. I hope this video has been helpful. I hope to the lady that asked this question, it has, you know, cleared your doubts on some of these things. And I also want to add that when you are married under the act, you cannot marry any other person. Okay, so right, this infidelity is very serious. You cannot marry another person. You can live with them, you can cheat. The cheating can be ground for dissolution, but you cannot marry any other person. So you can't go and do traditional marriage and say, okay, I'm marrying another woman. No, once you have been married under the act, you have married that woman. Any other thing is bigamy. Cough cough, Judy Austin and Eulogy. Any other thing is bigamy. Even if you've married traditionally, okay, once you've married traditionally, you cannot go and marry another woman under the act unless you're marrying the same person. Okay, so the law tries to make sure that these things are not conflicted. If you've married under the act, you can't marry another person at all. You can marry the same woman, traditional marriage. So me, I'm married traditionally and I'm also married under the act. If you've married somebody traditionally, you cannot go around about and go and now marry another person under the act. No, you have been married, you're married. Okay, any other thing is bigamy. So yes, this is where we are today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions on this topic for me, leave them in the comment section. If you want me to deal with your specific legal conundrum, legal solution, if you want me to answer your question, you're not paying me, but if you want to ask your question, please leave your comments in the comment section as well, or send me an email if it's private. I hope I see them. Sometimes I find that the emails are entering my spam box or whatever, but I'll try to answer your question. And yeah, I hope this has helped, and I'll see you in my next video. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up, please. You guys, let's get to the permanent site. Leave a comment, subscribe, and share to your friends. Bye.